What is it like to be a unified consciousness, and how is that different from what we experience here on Earth? I'm Ann Tucker, and thanks for coming by my YouTube channel. I am a trance channel. I channel from the angelic realm. And what that means is that I raise my awareness up as high as I can go when I'm in a meditative state, and then I go a little bit higher, and then the messages start to flow, and I transcribe them, I write them down, and I share them here with you on YouTube. And today's message is the angels lately have been talking an awful lot about what it's like to be an angel. How do we work with them? What is the experience of being an angel? Like, how are angels different from humans? And they are different. And they've been sharing a lot of information about this. And this is part of that, I think, series of messages that they've been sending through. So it's super, super interesting. And if you want to hear more messages like this one, please don't forget to like the video and subscribe. You can do it by pushing that little subscribe button that's down there in the just below the description box. And if you want to join me live, I am live every Friday at 10 a.m. in my Facebook group, which is called Spirit Means Business, and I would love to see you there as well. So here is the message. So here is what they're saying about what it is, their experience of being a collective consciousness versus our experience of being separated here on Earth. They say, becoming incorporated, so in other words, becoming part of a unified consciousness, becoming incorporated feels like being loved in depth, knowing you're allowed to have full access to your own self, absolved, and yet it is still within the same vibration of without, of external self. So they're saying that when you're in a unified consciousness, that you still have access to your sense of person, your sense of separateness. You still can access that. But they say that you're absolved, so you're not carrying any of the junk. You're not carrying any of your baggage. So it's like you have the memories, you have the awareness that you can embody that self, but you're not bringing in. It's like you're not bringing in all of the karma or the belief systems or whatever it is that are limitations. And I love how they say that it is this still the same vibration of without. And when I first got that, I thought it meant like without, like outside of ourselves, like the word out. And then I realized, no, they meant without, that when you're independent, you're without the rest, you're without the whole, right? So it's that vibration of without, which I think is just a potent way of phrasing it from the angels' perspective. Like, how would they see it? How would they see being collective? They see us as being without. And the word without has an emotional vibration to it, right? Like we're missing something. Like they see their collective consciousness as being something really like wonderful. And they said it feels like being loved in depth, and that we are without, that we don't have that. So I think that was very powerful from my perspective. They say that it's still the same vibration of our without, of our sense of being alone, being without that sense of being loved in depth. And then they say it's our external self. So outside of the collective. So that was a wowzer for me. So, going on, they say you incorporate our external beingness to become incorporated within your heart. And so this is how we become, so if we were to become part of the collective consciousness, this is how we would do it. This is what they're saying. And there will be a time that we all join the collective, right? And yes, we're part of a collective conscious awareness, like the human, like that sort of, there's a collective consciousness that we can tap into. But I mean, in terms of joining a collective where we no longer embody as an individual, that we become part of a collective thought, like the angels are. They are a collective. So what happens if we do that? What's that process like? And what they're explaining. They say you incorporate into our external beingness. You incorporate our external beingness. So in other words, we incorporate ourselves as we are right now, to become incorporated within your heart. So it's the incorporation that happens sort of within a heart space, within the heart. It opens to our enveloping frame, and your mind, it becomes centered and plural, many beings at once. So imagine this as like imagine you have passed, you're on the other side, and you have elevated your vibration to a level where you're ready to become part of a collective, right? And when that happens, it's like they come in through the heart space, they come in through the back. So they're literally describing the process as it happens. They come in through the heart chakra, right? And they're saying that your mind becomes centered and plural. So it's sort of like, imagine like the busy mind, no longer. It's like you just drop in, you become centered and plural, many beings at once. And then they say you can separate and feel, sense, know of your own sense. So you still maintain that ability to say, wait, I'm me in here. I'm still me. And you can be aware of what's happening. So you still feel, sense, know. You still have all of your awareness. They said this we allow can happen, but your pervasive enjoyment will be the experience of many selves, all aligned in one truth of knowing. So it's like once you go there, you don't come back. You don't want to come back. Like that, they said, it's that being a without. Why would you want to be without? That's experience of many selves aligned in truth. And I think about how, like, I think it's so much a truth about the human experience that no matter, like, you can be in a crowd of people and feel lonely, right? That we have an experience of aloneness that it's really hard to get over. And I don't think we ever really get over it. Like, even if you're in a wonderful, loving relationship, you have, people that you love, that you care about. Like I said, if you're in a crowd of people, you can still feel really lonely and alone. There's a sense of wanting, craving that connection. And it's so hard as a human to get it. And when you get it, it's like those sort of fleeting instances where you feel that this strong resonance with another person, where you feel really seen and understood, and that you really see and understand them. And they're saying here that you have that experience all the time, that's just your way of being. And that why would you be without that? Why would you choose not to have that, right? Yeah, it makes sense to me. I know when I was a kid, I used to always like to listen to the radio because it made me feel like I was connected to other people, right? That I was having a similar experience to them. So I would turn the radio on, and my window as a kid my view was out over this big valley. And I would stand at the window and I would look out and I would have the radio on, and I would wonder, who are all the people out there that are listening to the same station that I'm listening to, and that we're all sharing that experience right now. And I was craving that sense of connection, even as a little kid. And maybe I'm weird, but I bet you guys have done something like that too. So, okay. Anyway, so they go on to say that being in this collective, they say it absolves any conflict or reverberation of integration that lasts. So in other words, as you're once you cross over, joining this collective, it resolves any conflict or reverberation of like, wait a minute, I'm still attached to that human form. I'm still carrying over those, that baggage or that karma or that, whatever is like that lingering attachment to the earthly experience. It resolves all of that. Joining the collective. That's like all of a sudden you have this greater knowing, and all that stuff is gone. Any conflict or reverberation of integration that was lasting, that you brought with you, that you might have carried over. I said, nope, it's gone. Then they say it relinquishes the holding of our own identity and forms a new self, molded on identity, but not limited therein. So the new self, this new self that you would belong to, this collective, is molded on identity. So it feels like an identity. So in other words, that's why when you see people channeling and they're like, I'm channeling Seth, or I'm channeling like a consciousness, right? A collective consciousness. There is a sense of identity to it, right? That it might even have a sense of humor, right? That there's a person feeling about it. So it's molded on identity, but it's not limited to being, it's not limited in the way that we are. And they go on to talk about what that is. It holds the knowledge of self without limitation, without having to be isolated in one sense of expression. Knowing the total circumference of his being, meaning God, of having access to all parts within source light, and having unbeknownst understanding of how all transpires. And that's an interesting phrasing. So I think what they mean by that, having unbeknownst understanding, I think what they mean by that is that you know everything and you don't know how you know it, right? That it's like you step into this awareness and then all of a sudden you just have this dawning realization of all things, like of all awareness. Like you said, you have it's like the access to sort of source levels of knowledge. But you don't know how you got it. It's not like you read a book, you didn't get it from somewhere, nobody told you, you just have it. An unbeknownst understanding is how they phrase that. So I thought that was pretty cool. And then of how all transpires, how everything works. This is what you know. And you're saying, I used to listen to Casey Kasem and his top song list on the radio every week because I always felt like he was talking to me. Yeah, I wonder, that's really cool. I wonder if we were listening to the same thing. That's cool. So a deep knowing, you're saying. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's so that's really cool. So this idea of having access to all parts of source light, having unbeknownst understanding of how all transpires. Then they say having permeable awareness, not limited in understanding of the here and now. So so the permeable awareness I think is important, because when I feel into the angels and their awareness, it feels permeable. It feels like there's no barriers to it. It can go anywhere. It can cross dimensions. It can cross time. There's no boundaries to them at all. There's no boundaries to what they can perceive. So it's permeable. It can, yeah, it can go through anything and be anywhere, right? They go on to say, our awareness permeates all time, all existence, and separation limits the conscious perception to encompass only that frame settled on by the individual spirit. So when we embody, that separation limits our perception. So we're no longer able to see all of that. That it limits us to one frame that's settled on by us. We sort of choose this one frame that we're going to be incarnated into. And yeah, I think permeable. I agree. They're saying permeable is a great word to describe it. I totally agree. So we settle on this one, one perception or one frame. They say that limited window of thought belonging to an angle of the prism, one fold of consciousness, which is in fact multidimensional. So we have in other words, we're just seeing one side of it. When we incarnate, we're just little, like, I love that idea, one fold of the fabric. Imagine a cloth that's folded and folded and folded and folded, and we're just seeing one square of it. And that's what happens when we incarnate. And they say it is, in fact, it's the whole tablecloth. You open it up and that's the whole thing, and we're only seeing this one little square. They say separation limits the awareness to be focal and distinct from one another, to create division. And this division incorporates solid matter, limiting further your entrance of thought. So they say that just the fact that we've got this original division, this separation, is sort of the first piece of it that limits our vision, and then being physical further limits it, which we know, right? We've talked about, there's a lot of stories we've talked about once you incarnate, that experience is like the density just blocks out so much. So they go on to say those meandering threads must envelop yourself and not be expansive, must fit within the frame you have chosen, to be felt as knowledge understood by many, to be held as truth incorporated by your perceptive minds. And here they're getting into something that I think is super interesting about when we incarnate, what do we bring with us? What do we understand? And sort of what is that fold of the tablecloth or that prism, that piece of the prism the angle of the prism that we get to see is limited by, they're saying, held as truth incorporated by your perceptive minds. So it's like they're saying that when we incarnate, we buy into one frame of thinking about things. So in other words, like I'm incarnated here into, Western United States, into Washington State is where I live now. And so that has one, a culture. It has ways of thinking about things. It has patterns and that, the ways that we live our lives, expectations, and all of that is part of it, is what they're saying, that we have, and that we choose that when we incarnate. We pick, okay, I'm going to have this fold of the cloth or this fold of the cloth, which piece, and it incorporates the perception of normal for whatever place we are born into, for whatever family we're born into. All of that is like the perceptive lens. And that whatever we allow in, the meandering threads that we're saying, the meandering threads of thought that come in must envelop ourselves and not be too expansive. They have to fit within the frame that we've chosen. So we can only let in the things that work with, or that are fitting within this very limited way of perceiving, right? That we have this one perspective that we choose to be born into. And it's the truth incorporated by our perceptive mind. So it's a shared truth. They say, this is how one frame becomes the limit of perception, how all things must be limited in scope, translated to fit within the square of fabric, that woven masterpiece that is but a fraction of the whole entirety. And I think this, so anyways, was super interesting. And I love how they say that it's a woven masterpiece, but just a fraction of the whole entirety. okay, so they go on to talk a little bit about this, how we fit into, because it's not the collective, it's like, yes, there is the collective consciousness of all humanity, but I think what they're talking about is what plays a big role, bigger than I understood, is this idea that we have to fit within the collective of the culture, environment, family, all of those things, all the things that are our immediate experience of our daily lives. That's one of the big limits on our awareness and our ability to perceive. So they go on to say, there are fluid moments you have where you are above this framework and see our greater dimensionality. So maybe you astral travel, or maybe you have a deep meditation and you go up and you're able to see more. They say you see our wider viewpoint, not all comprehended. So even when we do that, we don't comprehend everything. We just see, we might see it and get some of it. So they say you see our wider viewpoint, not all comprehended. They say you are not capable of perception so vast as our own when you are embodied in this frame. All must fit and be within this narrow dynamic, must be understood within the frame of reference, to be compared, aligned, understood. And this gets a little complicated, but I think it makes sense. So, and by the way, I wanted to say, think about that, is that when they're saying that it has to be, we have to live within this framework that is our culture, our family, the patterns of a normal daily life in the place that we live, that those things limit our viewpoint. And so that only little threads of conscious awareness can come in, and we're limited from this greater vast hold. Think about how expanding it is when you travel. Right? That how it grows your perception when you are able to go on a big trip and see another place and see other cultures and experience that. How we talk about how broadening that is. And so I think really when you're doing that, you're letting in more threads, more consciousness, right? Which is, I think, super cool. Getting another square of the cloth, maybe. Okay, so they go on to say that when you let things in, when information comes in, it has to become compared, aligned, understood. That a causal link is taken to understand, comprehend. So in other words, it's something that here they're describing how we understand things. They're saying that we compare and align things to understand them. They're saying that they're a causal link to taken to understand, comprehend. So a causal link says we are looking at something and saying this causes that. That's another way we comprehend things. We say, oh, this happened because that happened. So causality is another way that we comprehend. Then they go on to say that which you will accept in your minds. So that's another layer, is what are we willing to accept as truth or knowledge? And then they go on to say the knowing takes place as understanding by creating different viewpoints, comparison. So comparison is another method that we use to comprehend things. So they're kind of going through all the different ways that we are capable of comprehending things right now. They say these are valid, important parts of your anatomy. Your ability to perceive is constructed thus. We are not held in the same manner. We rise above that plane and see all methods, all comprehensions, dimensions, and space. So yeah, so a super, super interesting message today. And I think it made me rethink some things about how all of this works, right? How is it that we are separate, and what is it like to be unified? And I love the description they gave us about when you cross over, when you're ready to become part of that unified consciousness. And there is a time, right, that when we're going to be able to do that, when we cross over and we're ready and we're finished with living earth lessons, and you become absorbed into this collective. And they say, yeah, I love the fact that we still get to keep the memory or become still who we are. But their description of how that actually physically happens, and it's not physical at that point, but how it happens in the best way that we can perceive it. And that thought about the living in our little square. And it does make sense about like, hey, engaging in life and opening up new threads of consciousness. There's a lot to be said for experience other cultures and going to new places and meeting new people and broadening out our understanding of what a normal life is. And that by itself is a way to grow our conscious awareness. So, all right, you guys, cool message for today. Thank you so much for joining me. As I mentioned, I will get the Wisdom Soup video posted very soon for you guys. And yeah, it was great to see you. So thank you so much for joining in, and I'm sending you guys big love. I will see you soon. Bye.